they saw very little increase in energy-corrected milk. Not exactly sure why. Well, I can come up with theories, but I do know that starch can affect fiber digestion. So at least part of the problem here is we're seeing big changes in how fiber is digested, probably seeing changes in how much methane is lost. So we're losing some efficiency here. The apparent metabolizable energy value of that wheat was not nearly as high as we thought it was. We thought it was going to be like 13 point something megajoules per kilo. It's not. Okay? There's no way it's that high because it's having an impact on digestion and partition. Okay, then if we look at the other options, they pretty much all increased as we had increase in grain. We see an increase in energy-corrected milk, but there are differences between them. Note the green line, these are the animals that were just simply given more pasture. Given more pasture, they produce more milk, and almost surely you're going to make more money because the cows are going to be more efficient. Okay, so why did this happen? Well, it's probably related to milk fat responses. Okay, in the diet that was all wheat at milking, they saw a big drop in milk fat percent. And what happened was not only did we have a change in digestibility, but we're increasing trans fatty acids. We're partitioning more nutrients to body weight gain instead of milk. With the other ones, they were relatively consistent, but there's one other piece of information I want to point out here, and that is rumen pH. And I only took 2 diets here. The grain mix, these diets are exactly the same, okay? Same components, same estimated ME concentration, same grain to forage ratio, but when they fed the PMR, there was a more consistent pH throughout the day. Okay, so the rumen was more consistent as you went throughout the day. And although they didn't see a huge advantage in energy-corrected milk in this particular study, I think if they had gone longer, they eventually would see it. Okay, so if you can have a more consistent rumen pH, that's almost always good in the long run. And part of that is, in general, if we just think about the wheat diet, there's plenty of data now to show that when you feed more ruminally degraded starch, cows typically eat less. It doesn't always happen. This is data from Mike Ellen. He put together a series of graphs that showed how different diets affect intake. And here, grains with faster ruminal starch digestion rates can decrease feed intake. They don't always decrease feed intake. Sometimes maybe they're only a small part of the diet. If you have only 3-4 kilos of grain per day, I don't think it matters whether the stuff is rapidly digested, rapidly fermented or not. It's when you get up to 10 kilos of grain per day that it matters whether the stuff is rapidly fermented or not, especially if it's all fed in the milking part. Okay? Then fermentation rate makes a huge difference, and I would expect that feeding corn grain, I'm 99.9% confident that if you fed corn grain, maize grain in the parlor twice a day, instead of wheat or barley, you won't see as much of a drop in intake as you might otherwise see. So the barley, the wheat are going to decrease dry matter intake almost surely, especially when you feed them at 10 kilos per day, 5 kilos each feeding. Okay, so back to the original question, which supplements to choose? These things are not enough, and I'm going to ignore the bottom part for a second and just point out that I went to the Dairy Australia website. They do have in more information than just ME and CP. They do point out that fermentation rates and starch content are important. Okay? And I want to leave that really as a take-home message today. You have to look at these. It's not easy to put into equations. It's not easy to use them on your calculator when you think about what's the price per unit of energy. But it matters to the cow. Okay, so in summary, ME values can never be accurate in all situations. Crude protein values, they're accurate, but they're only part of the story. We need to think about how much metabolizable protein is there, how much is hitting the intestines and available to the gland. Price per unit of energy or crude protein are useful, but what happens to intake and partitioning are really important. No computer program can do that accurately, and you need to be watching your cows to see what they're telling you. So monitoring cows, strategizing to improve intake are essential to good feeding practices. And then I would just close with, I think I have 2 slides left, okay? So, strategies to maximize dry matter intake. That's absolutely essential. If you can get your cows to eat more, that's almost always beneficial. Feed a diet with adequate protein to stimulate mammary pull. So if you short the cow over the long run on protein, and by that I don't mean crude protein to the cow, I mean protein hitting the mammary gland. Okay? If you short the cow over time, you're going to lose mammary cells, they're going to lose some of their activity, and eventually the cow will have less pull. The mammary gland pulls nutrients as it's active producing milk. Provide a comfortable environment, especially by the feed bunk or in wherever they're eating. Ensure fresh palatable feed is available whenever a cow wants to eat it. In the Allen Bank study, simply giving the cows 25 kilogram pasture allowance instead of 15, they produce more milk. It's not really a big surprise, right? Okay, give the cows more, make sure they have feed available. Instead of, they come back from the parlor, they hit the paddock, they graze everything, and then there's nothing left for the last 5 hours they're out there. Okay, then you need to make sure they always have some fresh grass available. Try to distribute that throughout the day, and I guess there are new ways of people are thinking about how you might do this, moving the fencer as the day goes on. Strive for a consistent rumen environment. Consider feeding partial or even total mixed rations. I know this is probably anathema to some of you, but it's worth thinking about, especially maybe for some of the cows that are most prone to have issues, or most the ones who especially we want to try to maximize intake in and keep a consistent rumen environment. Maybe it would be the fresh cows or the first 100 days. Maybe those cows, maybe it makes sense to feed a TMR, preserve your pasture for some of the later lactation cows. And then, sorry my slide's messed up here, but monitor intake or feeding behavior. And finally, I think just think out of the box. What could you do to encourage greater feed intake, especially during hot weather? Maybe some people will try this, but I don't know, feed a PMR under a barn with a roof where the cows are cool in the heat of the day and let them out at pasture at night. Anybody do that? I don't know, I think that's what we did when I was a kid when the weather was hot and my dad had great production. Maybe that doesn't seem practical to you. I'm just saying, just try to think of off-the-wall things and be a leader and be somebody who's doing something new that might actually be beneficial. Could you feed for a more consistent rumen? How could you feed to try to keep the mammary gland pulling nutrients? Is there a way to feed a PMR? If you could feed a partial mixed ration, if you can get some of the fiber and grain into the cows in the middle of the day between milkings instead of feeding all that grain at the time of milking, that's got to be beneficial, and the Allen Bank data clearly shows that it can be. Could you feed grain more times a day? And maybe it sounds silly or stupid, but I have some beef cows at home. When the pasture is short, and I don't want them coming in the barn, I just put grain on the pasture. I just put it on the ground in a line next to the fence line, and they really eat most of it. Maybe that sounds stupid, like you're wasting grain, but if you can get wheat way cheaper than corn, okay, so they waste 10% of it. Maybe it's still to your advantage. Okay, if you can get, even if they only ate 90% of it or 80% of it, I bet it's going to pay back. Okay, they're always going to waste some grain. Okay, I would rather have them waste a little bit in the middle of the day when you're feeding them at a paddock than consume it all and screw up the rumen. And finally, what are your cows telling you, and is the cheaper grain really the best for your buck? With that, I'd be happy to take a couple questions.